are going to begin our conversation today, and I am glad that you all are here. We are seeing from the crowd that's here that we've got terrific interest. There are a few seats up front, so if you need to sit down, come on ahead. I'm Anne Franklin, and I'm happy to be part of this lecture series. We address all kinds of interesting topics, so if you're not already online to get the schedule that's coming up, be sure you check with a staff person before you leave today. We're going to talk about the downtown plan, and we have Ken Bowers, who knows a lot about it, who has guided the process. Tricia Hash was the staff person who interacted with so many of us, and she is not able to be here today. David Diaz will follow me. But I just want to say a couple things briefly. Raleigh is I wore my urban pin, by the way, because Raleigh's slipping up into being something a lot bigger than we have been before. And that means that our downtown is changing a lot. And we hope that we've put together a plan that will give some guidance to that for the next 10 years and will also launch us into the time when we'll be having even bigger ideas, and those will take shape and get some life to them. The crowd here today indicates that there's deep interest in this. I particularly want to thank Scott Cutler for chairing our advisory committee. It was a great pleasure to work with him. And I have to tell you something about this advisory committee. It was very broad. And somebody told me one time that a classic New Yorker way of behaving is if you pop into a little corner store and you're looking for directions, they'll give you the directions, but then they'll walk out the door and follow you down the street and shake their finger to be sure you're doing what they suggested you do. And I think our advisory board was a lot like that. We were not just, weigh in and say happy things. We were right on it, and will continue to be. So we look forward to that and to the participation of everybody in the room and everybody who cares about the heartthrob of our city. So let's move right along, and David Diaz with the Downtown Raleigh Alliance.
Great, thank you. We're actually going to do a little switcheroni here and have Ken go first. And instead of him going over one part of the plan and me the other, he's going to give the broad overview of the plan. And then I'm going to try to add some complimentary remarks about what we're seeing with the downtown right now. Because I find that often when we talk about the future, somebody's wondering about, well, how's it changing right now? So I'm going to add a little flavor to that and kind of compliment Ken after he goes and gives you the broad brush about the plan. I do want to recognize I've seen two council members, Councilor Bonner Gaylord, if you can raise your hand, and Councilor Russ Stevenson right down there. So congratulations on your re-election. Thank you for coming. And right now I'll turn it over to Ken Bowers.
Thanks, David. A lot going on in downtown. We're expecting a lot of great things to happen. I'm going to give you an overview of the plan that we've created. This is intended to shape the next 10 years of growth, development, and change in the downtown. And the crowd in this room is certainly indicative of the fact that this is a topic that a lot of people are interested in. I will start, of course, by putting up a slide recognizing our many partners in the public, private, and nonprofit sector who were participated in this. We had a very active and engaged steering committee with broad representation from the business community, property owner community, from other local governments, from residents, et cetera, all involved in this effort. Also, many of these entities were major donors to fund the planning effort and the hiring of a top-notch national consulting team to work with the city staff in creating this, led by Sasaki Associates, along with HRNA and other firms. The purpose of the plan is to look out 10 years into the future and articulate a vision for what downtown can be. We know our downtown is good. We're shooting for greatness, and we have a time horizon that we want to achieve that greatness is 10 years. And so we wanted a plan that gave us enough time to actually do and accomplish things, but was not so far in the future that people would lose interest in the planning process because it seems like things would never happen. So it's a very action-oriented plan with a discrete time horizon with a lot of stuff that's supposed to happen in the first 3-5 years and on for that 10-year time horizon. We wanted to identify very specific actions necessary to achieve that level of greatness that we're proposing for our downtown, to give it some geographic focus. The downtown study area, which I'll get to in a second, is large. We can't do everything, so we need to set priorities. What are the geographic priorities for the plan? And then of the key implementation steps, can we flesh those out into discrete items that we can then carry forward with the help of our partners and with the City Council? The plan carries that into a 4-part structure. It's got 4 major chapters. The first chapter is the vision statement, sort of sums up what the plan is about, where we're going with the downtown. The framework themes, there are 4 of them. The sort of the broad outline of what the objectives are of the plan, and the meat in terms of the actual goals and action items is in that framework section. Catalytic project areas is where we bring that geographic focus into play. What are the areas that would most benefit from targeted attention and intervention? And then the implementation element is where we scope those key action steps and provide more direction as to who's going to do what. The downtown boundary is the same as we've used for the comprehensive planning process in terms of defining what the downtown is. The definitions of what downtown is vary, but we're looking at the urban core of the downtown that encompasses the Fayetteville Street commercial spine, that encompasses the state government complex, that reaches out to the whole Glenwood South area, all the way to Glenwood, Brooklyn, and Cameron Park, and it goes north along the North Person area and to encompass the Seaboard area, and it goes further south to encompass Shaw University. And then we also extended a little west, but we really focused on the districts that are at the core of this area: Glenwood South, Capitol District, Fayetteville Street, Moore Square, Nash Square, Warehouse District, et cetera. The vision statement is something that we spent a lot of time working with the advisory committee crafting, and it focuses on where the downtown is headed. Traditionally, the downtown was a center for government, it was a center for banking, it was a center for law. And we've starting to see the economic base of the downtown in the last 10 years transform dramatically. There's so much more entrepreneurial activity, there's so much more technology, there's so much more innovation going in downtown. And we really wanted to reflect that in the vision statement and the terminology that we chose to be very forward-looking as to where we're going. Not that we're leaving those old base sectors behind, but that we're diversifying the economy of the downtown, moving into new places and really focusing on innovation, entrepreneurship, arts and culture as the basis for an ever more lively and vibrant downtown. I talked about the 4 framework themes that form the meat of the plan in terms of the goals and actions. The first one is breathe. You know, as the downtown develops, it's becoming a denser place. It'll have more jobs, it'll have more housing and more residents, it'll have more retail, more activity, more visitors. And as such, we need a place that accommodates that level of activity, but also provides the infrastructure, the green infrastructure necessary to provide a respite from that vibrancy and activity. And so the major concepts here is looking at a series of north-south spines. The obvious one is Fayetteville Street and Halifax Mall. That was the major north-south spine when the original Christmas plan for the city was platted. It has a commercial focus, and it has a governmental and museum focus on the north side of the square. But then we looked at complementing that with 2 green spines, basically looking at how the Greenway network and the Park network approaches downtown. And so there's one on the left oriented along the West Street corridor that's going to tie the Dix Hill property and the future Dix Hill Park through to Raleigh Union Station and up to a future park at Devereaux Meadows north of P Street, and then eventually continue connections on up into the Crabtree Creek. And on the east side, connecting the open spaces at Chavis Park up north through Oakwood Cemetery and then along the Cemetery Branch, again, eventually connecting up to Crabtree Creek. And looking at the street infrastructure, the opportunity for enhanced streetscapes, cycle tracks, and other ways of creating these green corridors on there. And then linking that crosstown, the streets of Martin and Hargett, which link Nash and Moore Square, the 2 major public open spaces downtown, to these green corridors. So the focus here is really bringing nature into the city, bringing green infrastructure into the city, enhancing the parks network, and connecting the park resources that are both existing and proposed into a network of open spaces. The second one, which is closely related, is move. And that's focused on what is the transportation network in downtown. Downtown, because it was platted, with a completely realized street grid when it was originally laid out by William Christmas in 1792, we have a very good street grid that's evolved a lot over time. The hierarchy of streets used to be that the big axial streets, Hillsborough, Fayetteville, Halifax, and New Bern, were the major corridors. Now we have McDowell and Dawson serving by far the largest vehicular traffic movement in the city, because it's now part of the US 1, US 401 corridor. Some of the streets are deprecated. Halifax Street largely no longer exists. Fayetteville Street is still the major commercial spine in downtown. But we want to look at how the street grid could be repurposed to look at the full range of transportation options, with a heavy focus on creating a great pedestrian realm, creating great cycling facilities to handle a lot of circulation and knit the different districts together, and then also how is transit coming into this mix and being accommodated within the street grid. The transit system, of course, is focused on downtown currently. It's where most of the rides terminate or originate or transfer today. Looking at how we can retool that system to provide better circuits, not just to downtown, but within downtown, is a major part of this theme. Next, we looked at STAY, and STAY is about growth and development. And it looks at what is the permanent base of both employees and residents, and where are the growth opportunities largely clustered. And so we've identified 4 areas of the downtown that really seem to have the biggest opportunity to accommodate a lot of growth going forward. And they are going from south to north, the Gateway Center area, which I'm going to talk a little bit more as part of the CATALYTIC project areas. That's this large area of land located near the Convention Center and Performing Arts Center on the south side of downtown. The area around the 2 squares, Moore Square and Nash Square, where some major public investments are being proposed and made. The enhancements to Moore Square, currently in design. The creation of the new Raleigh Union Station, currently under construction. And then moving north from there along the west and Harrington Street corridor, what we're calling Glenwood Green. It's an extension of Glenwood South, west over the tracks, and there's an enormous amount of opportunity in that part of downtown to grow a new neighborhood. Where currently it's an assemblage of one-story warehouses and other such buildings, and we're already seeing an enormous amount of development activity there. And then LINK is a theme that is not focused on physical planning, it's focused on how to make things happen, and a key part of that is building partnerships. So the city cannot do all this alone. When we're looking at the state government complex, we're looking at our partners in the state government and seeing what role we can play to support their efforts and the governor's efforts to revitalize and to enhance the state government area. We're looking at the educational institutions, William Peace University, Shaw University, how we can partner with them to leverage their assets and their campuses to be an integral part of the downtown experience. We're looking at the business community as a major partner, and we're looking at the nonprofits who are involved in everything from affordable housing to social services, and how that relates to the goals and objectives of the plan. And as I said, I can't go through, there's like over 120 discrete action items in support of the goals of this plan, so we obviously can't go through them, but I wanted to give you a taste of how this section was structured. Under each of the themes, we have a numbered list of goals, and then we have specific action items designed to implement those goals. So the theme is this major big picture thing we're trying to achieve: better transportation, green space in the city. The goals are broad objectives of how we're going to achieve that, and the actions are discrete checklist items that we're going to be trying to check them all off in the next 10 years, all 124 of them. The catalytic project areas segue out of that into what is going to be the geographic focus for the plan. This is the area where the city is going to work with our partners to focus the most targeted interventions to try to make things happen. And they were chosen based on both opportunity. There's opportunity in terms of capacity to absorb new stuff in these areas, as well as the fact that a role for the public sector is needed to help catalyze that new development. So it's both the opportunity and the fact that intervention can make a difference is what made these areas the focus areas in terms of the catalytic projects. And I want to start with Gateway Center, and we've produced, with the consultant team has produced some very nice renderings of what these areas could look like going forward. Just to the west of the Convention Center is a very large assemblage of land owned by 4 owners. The city is one of those owners, and it's basically bounded by McDowell Street, the MLK on the south, Salisbury Street, and South Street on the north. And it's an area that probably you've been by a million times and not really looked at it. It's got a few low-scale buildings, mostly one-story development. The North Carolina Association of Educators is there. The Wake County Chamber of Commerce is there. There's a disused Duke Energy building there, and then the city has a gravel parking lot that's kind of used to support the Convention Center and Performing Arts Center. Lots of land in this area, probably the biggest contiguous assemblage under such a small number of owners in the entire downtown. And so we look at this as an area that could really create a whole new urban experience on the south end of downtown, leveraging the assets that are already there, because our major destinations, the Performing Arts Center and the Convention Center, are bookending this area. And also the city owns two major sites. The two parking lots at the south end of Fayetteville Street are city-owned sites. Eventually the goal is to move those for major developments that would really create the capstone to the Fayetteville Street revitalization and extend that final block of Fayetteville Street south. So this is a unique opportunity, and we produced two scenarios. This one is focused on hotels to support the convention center, office uses, and residential to support the downtown living and working environment. But this key corner down here is big enough that if there was a desire and a will and a tenant to support a major venue for sporting events or large-scale entertainment events, this would be the one place where there's a footprint available to do that. So we've also prepared another alternative that shows a major cultural entertainment and sporting venue and how that could be sited on the south end and integrate with the development. One of the great things about a downtown is that this type of venue typically requires a lot of parking, but when you locate it in a mixed-use environment, the parking that's not being used by office workers during the day is magically available for the venue patrons in the evenings and on weekends, and it allows a much more compact and vibrant footprint when you're able to put this type of use into a mixed-use setting as opposed to a single-purpose setting. The north end is at the opposite end of the spectrum. This is an area that encompasses the North Person Street Business District as well as Seaboard area, and what we're really talking about is small-scale interventions to try to knit this area together into a more cohesive, pedestrian-friendly whole. So it's really focused, a lot of its effort is focused on improving the streetscape and the pedestrian crossings and pedestrian experience and bike connections on P Street, and also building on plans the city has already made for some major enhancements on North Person and North Blunt as part of the overall Wake Forest Blunt and Person corridor plan that was completed a couple years ago that shows how we can improve pedestrian facilities and create bike facilities on those two corridors. Moore Square, another very interesting area, has several unique assets. The square itself, premier open space in downtown, getting ready to make a very major investment in upgrading that open space and really creating an incredible destination square in downtown capable of hosting all sorts of activities. It's leveraging major magnets. The Marbles Children's Museum is a huge destination with thousands and thousands of people coming every year. What is there for the children in the park who are coming to Marbles to also enjoy the park and for those families to enjoy the park? The Moore Square bus terminal is also programmed for a major capital enhancement. This is the locus of transportation and transit in downtown today. How do we make it work better, how this area work better for those users and improve the pedestrian flows in and out of the transit center? City Market, an amazing historic asset, a retail environment like none other in downtown. How can we support and enhance that? And then on the east side of Moore Square, the city owns a controlling interest in the block there along with some other property owners, and there's a long-term interest in seeing whether some major development could be catalyzed there. So there's so much activity and potential here. This is an incredible district, and again, the city will have a major role simply because of property ownership in this area as to how that moves forward. Nash Square, Union Station, another area. The major investment underway here, of course, is Raleigh Union Station, the associated open spaces and plazas. We also have a large municipal block with a empty building and our current Raleigh Municipal Building there, and we're looking at long-term plans for how to create a great environment on our own campus and how we can accommodate more of our space needs on that campus. And then there's lots of development opportunities around this. You may have heard about the sale of the News and Observer property. The city owns some property on the other side of the square. There's lots of potential property in play here, and if we can create a great public space in Nash Square, it helps catalyze and leverage those development opportunities. Whereas Moore Square, the plan has been about events and activity, the Nash Square plan is more about capitalizing on the character of the square, which is very leafy green and having a sort of focusing on a restful interior with a more activation of the edges of the square, as opposed to trying to directly activate the center of the square with multi-purpose spaces. And then Glenwood Green, lastly, is an area that is set for some significant transformation. And the two things that are setting the stage are that the old Devereaux Meadows property, which is floodplain north of P Street and has been occupied for a long time by city sanitation and vehicle fleet uses, we're moving out of there. That's all gone to other parts of the city, to our new sanitation facility to the east and our new remote operations facility just north of Capitol Boulevard on Westinghouse. And we were deciding what to do with this, and as part of the Capitol Boulevard plan, we said, given the environmental issues with the stream and the fact this is mostly floodplain, this should be a park, and we should reimagine it as a great park, as a restored Pigeon House branch, as a water feature and a place to put a greenway and open spaces, and use that value to create value for the upland property around it, as opposed to trying to redevelop the city property. And in the south of that, we've been partnering with the NCDOT, as I'm sure you've read recently, this bridge replacement project that's going to tear down the bridge that carries Capitol Boulevard over P Street in stages and replace it with a brand new bridge, would provide the opportunity to totally rethink the ramp infrastructure in this area. And on the west side of Capitol, we're actually bringing the ramp off south of P Street, and it's going to take you right into the street grid. And it's a design called a square loop, but what it means is the ramp infrastructure is creating a new block pattern, a new urban block pattern for this area, which is going to totally change the parcelization and the development sites here and help catalyze that next wave of development along with the park amenity. So we see the energy that has been so focused on Glenwood Avenue, North Boylan, spreading to Weston Harrington and creating a new urban neighborhood in this area that we're calling Glenwood Green, framed by this open space and catalyzed by these major public investments. And then I'm about to wrap up. I did want to talk about how we're planning to finance and build the plan. So there were three major things that we wanted to target in terms of public intervention. Nash Square, Warehouse District and Union Station, Gateway Center, and downtown retail. First two being geography, the last one being a topic. And we wanted to say, what are the key actions necessary to move forward on each of these three items, and what are the implementation steps for doing that? So we're going to focus heavily in the Nash Square area on what is the purpose and function of Nash Square. And so that starts with a lot of study. It starts with an inventory of what's there, what are the historic and cultural resources associated with the square and the surroundings. We're going to look at a way of how do we fund these types of improvements and create a more dedicated funding stream for the types of higher end maintenance that go into downtown public open spaces, which are different from other types of parks, because first of all, the complexity of the parks, the amount of improvements that are in the parks, and the heavy usage that they get compared to most parks. The next one is looking at disposition of city-owned land. City owns a lot of land throughout the downtown. We touched on some of the major assemblages on the south end of Fayetteville Street, on the east side of Moore Square, on the west side of Nash Square. What is our strategy for how we eventually, holding on to the land doesn't do us any good. It only does us good when we put it into the hands of the private sector to make a major investment on it. But what is it that we need to see as part of that transaction to make that happen? So we're looking at a study, which will actually be kicking off later this year, of what is our strategy for disposition, how are we going to put stuff onto the market, what sorts of uses do we want to get out of that process beyond just getting maybe, do we sell it just for the highest bidder, or do we want to see specific things? And so that's a key question that underlines the implementation that we'll be answering. Gateway Center, again, we're one of 4 owners for this area. How do we get the other owners on board and collaborate on a shared vision? And so this starts really with outreach. It starts with getting the interested parties to the table and saying, we all have an interest here. If we pursue our interests individually, we get one thing, but if we're able to coordinate and put a unified face forward in terms of how this area could transform and grow, we might get something much greater than if we were off on our own, doing our own thing. And so starting that conversation is a key part of it. If the interest is there, going to the next phase and basically master planning the area, coming up with a strategy for how it will be developed over time, and what sort of public infrastructure investments are going to be necessary to deal with access issues, to make sure the utility infrastructure is there, other things necessary to support major redevelopment in this area. And then downtown retail. We have a lot of discussion, and it's been much in the press lately about the nature of downtown retail, what is the composition of the retail storefronts, what's going on with rents in the downtown, and it's a mixed story. And the occupancy levels and the amount of retail activity, and thanks in a large part to the efforts of the DRA, has never been better. The occupancy levels are high, rent growth is strong, and we want rents to be affordable, but on the other hand, we have a lot of old buildings where the rents have to be strong enough, sufficient that it is economically feasible to put the space out on the market and bring it up to modern code standards such that it's leasable. So we want rents that accommodate entrepreneurs, but we want rents that also make space available in the marketplace and make it viable to take old buildings and put and rehabilitate retail spaces. And so we were in one position, we're moving to another position. There's a lot of work to do, and part of it is what is the role of the city and incentives and other things in recruiting specific types of retailers into the downtown. What are the gaps? What would catalyze more retail investment in downtown and diversify our retail base? So with that, I'm going to wrap up my presentation and turn the microphone over to David. But just in concluding, I think that an enormous amount of work, enormous amount of public involvement across all of our public meetings went into this plan. We're incredibly pleased with how it's turned out and very excited about carrying it forward.
We have our plan now. Been working on this for like 3 years when we started raising money for this plan, and so it's exciting to have a partnership with the city, that we can move forward with a blueprint now. Several big picture kind of thoughts as Ken was talking is that I remember interviewing for this job 8 years ago and was very excited about thinking about the organization and how we could move the organization forward, the alliance. And I must have not been too excited about the downtown, because the executive search person after the interview said, you may want to sound more excited about downtown Raleigh. Because the board members were wanting me to say, this is an awesome downtown. It wasn't. It wasn't. It wasn't that good, actually. This was 8 years ago, so why do I say that? We have to temper our expectations commensurate with where our downtown is now. This downtown success is super recent. And we all want it to have all the toys we'd like for it to have. But we've got to temper it and understand that this downtown was in decline not too long ago, and our success is recent. The other thing that's exciting about this time nationally and globally is that we've never seen a time when so many things are coming together, converging towards a downtown. We were just in San Francisco at a downtown conference a couple weeks ago. They're dealing with the exact same issues we are. Affordability, mobility, all of those things. And so what's exciting for people like Ken and I is that there's going to be a ton of innovation and experimentation in our downtowns over the next 10 years. There's some proven practices, which I think are really nicely embedded in this plan, and we know work for revitalizing a downtown. But there's also things that we're having to learn on the fly because our downtowns are growing so fast. And so we've got to double our efforts to work with our colleagues in other cities to learn about what's working, because the downtowns are growing too quickly for us to anticipate all the impacts we're going to have. So we got to temper our expectations, and we're going to make mistakes along the way. So I'm going to apologize right now for that. But it's a truly exciting time to be in this field. And because of the changes in technology, in people, individuals wanting to get involved in revitalization and civic life, please, if you're interested in getting involved, please email me. We need more thoughts and minds thinking about how do we take this downtown forward. So with that being said, a few other comments about the plan. The first sentence in the vision statement is that downtown is an economic engine. And that may sound straightforward to some of you, but again, it wasn't the case for downtown not too long ago. In fact, over probably 40% of our downtown doesn't generate any tax revenue at all for the city. That's not good. You don't want to subsidize investments in the downtown because that's going to take away money from other parts of the city. In fact, you want a downtown that almost acts like a profit center and generates more money so that other things can be built in other parts of the city. And that's where we're headed, and that's a really good thing. And so it's good to see that we're seeing more investment in our downtown. The Gateway Center, in my mind, is a big priority. Another trend, in addition to millennials and baby boomers wanting to live in downtown, is the change in hospitality and tourism, where we're seeing record amounts of growth in tourism in cities across our country. And right now, we're really woefully behind on the number of hotel rooms in our downtown. And so that's a big concern for us there. It's an area that we should be having a lot more hotel rooms, and we don't. We funded a study with the city and the convention center and the visitor bureau and the chamber. The other thing that we've done too is, even though we've gone through a zoning process, I still feel like we're approaching the downtown in a very suburban way. The consultant who was doing the hotel study found that even in our new ordinance, we're requiring 1 parking space for every hotel room. And 50% of the travel to downtown is all business. So those folks are basically coming through taxi airports. They don't even have a car, but we're requiring a parking space. And what you want for a downtown is not to add more parking spaces, but to make it more walkable and allow for other forms of transit. And so we've got to look at our zoning code, continue to look at it to not discourage development. The other area where we're challenged is we've got a lot of small sites in downtown, and people wonder, why is that empty? Well, there's a lot of requirements on what you can do, what you have to do in order to develop a small site in downtown. So I think while we've got a great plan, we still need regulations that need amending so that we can facilitate more investment in the downtown. Retail is a priority in this plan. And again, kind of going back to my remark, our success is really, really recent. And if you look at the evolution of most downtowns, you see dining coming before soft good retail, meaning non-dining, non-bar. And that's where we are right now as a downtown. But I'm hopeful that we're going to continue to find non-food and non-bar retail. There's actually over 40 non-bar, non-restaurant retails in our downtown. And if you Google Shop Downtown Raleigh, please patronize them. They need your help. And that's the one thing is we get a lot of advocates saying, we want more retail, and they're not patronizing our stores. You got to do that. You got to help them out because it's really, really hard to make it work the first or second year in a downtown. That's why we launched a grant. So for non-food, non-bar, you can get up to $5,000 grant if you bring a retail store to the downtown. And so we're processing that now. Residential growth, we're going to see a lot more density. And it's really interesting. 75% of the Sky House apartment building is pre-leased. That's pretty good because they got a little bit of a late start in the spring. And so what's interesting about that is that, part of the thought process was that that apartment building was commanding the highest rents in the city. And people didn't know if they were going to move in because it wasn't going to be affordable. And it just shows you how much demand we have for people wanting to live in a downtown with a high-end product like that. And I think it's going to bode well for the other apartment buildings in the downtown. And, the retail and residential go hand in hand. There are still pockets of our downtown where we hardly have any residential. And people want retail now. It's just not going to happen in those areas as quickly of our downtown. I would say that the other thing that we need to do is let's conceptually think of the downtown and the surrounding areas as one area to bring more retail to downtown. Because we're not going to be able to satisfy the demand that we have and the rents that some people cannot pay in the core. But let's look to other areas outside of the downtown where we can find spaces for those retailers. We've done that already. We've had retail prospects come to us and say, we want to be on Fayetteville Street. We found a place for them next to Standard Foods at Person Street in that area, and they were just as happy with it. So I think we've got to look at not placing the burden of all of our retail spaces on a small area, but look a little broader. Same thing with housing affordability. We've got to develop a plan that goes beyond the core of downtown to make sure that people can live in the downtown. And I think the other piece to that is, if you care about the downtown, which if you're here you do, we really need you to vote for a referendum next year to support transit. Because if we don't support that transit piece, it's really going to be hard to make this downtown more walkable and to have a quality of life that people want for it. And so if you want to get involved in that, by the way, the Chamber of Commerce is developing both a young professionals group and other groups to get involved in the vote for supporting more transit in our downtown. And so I'll just end with this. I think one of our biggest opportunities as well is to encourage a positive relationship with government, business owners, and residents. Downtowns across the country are also challenged by these skirmishes that have been polarizing our community in certain issues, such as ours, like outdoor seating. And if you look at what's going on in downtown, it's very exciting. We've got all of these new things that are coming to our downtown, but there's still going to be tough choices ahead, and we've got to work together to make these things happen. We've got a lot of new people, a lot of new players in the downtown, and we also have to keep in mind that these things are important. A downtown with economic horsepower, a downtown that's connected, a downtown that's more neighborhood friendly, but we also need to have a clean and safe downtown. That's the fundamental part of a downtown that allows us to do other things. Last year, we removed 70,000 pounds of litter, our ambassadors, from downtown sidewalks. We're expecting to do more this year. We're also conducting a litter audit with the city sustainability office to figure out how much more we can do to keep the downtown clean. We're also working more with the police to also work to make it safe. And so those things we can't forget about. We've got to continue to keep a clean and safe downtown. And if we do that, we're going to be able to really grow it and have a successful one. Thank you very much.